Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really close look at a car that's made huge waves, hasn't it? The Tesla Model 3.
Absolutely. It really shook things up. Came onto the scene promising all this innovation, great performance, a totally modern driving feel,
And it definitely delivered for a lot of people, became incredibly popular. You see them everywhere.
for sure. But, when something gets that widespread, it also gets put under the microscope. Real-world use, independent reviews, they start highlighting things that maybe weren't obvious at first glance.
Exactly. And that's where our source material comes in today. We're not looking at Tesla's marketing here. We're digging into an analysis called Tesla Model 3 sur un larve riscaleri.
Which translates roughly to Tesla Model 3 problems and risks. And its whole purpose is to compile these common issues and potential safety risks that have been reported. It says it draws on user experiences and also what it calls official records.
Right. So our mission today, just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, is to unpack this specific source. We want to understand exactly what points it raises about the Model 3. We'll pull out the key insights from this analysis for you.
And it's really important we stress this. We're here to report impartially on what's in this source. We're not saying this is definitively true or this is wrong. We're just exploring what this one analysis actually says.
Yep. Just laying out the information from this perspective.
And the source itself helps us structure this. It makes a clear split between common issues. The stuff people report frequently that might be annoying but maybe not immediately dangerous.
Okay.
And then reported safety risks, which sound a lot more serious.
That makes sense. A good way to break it down. So let's maybe start by understanding the source's overall approach. It doesn't just trash the car from the get-go, does it?
No, not at all. It definitely acknowledges the Model 3's impact, calls out its popularity, the innovative design, the performance. It sets it up as a major player, a key choice for people switching to electric.
But then, like you said, it pivots pretty quickly. After saying those positive things, it shifts focus straight to what it calls these chronic problems and potential safety risks.
Right. And it grounds those claims, saying they come from collected user feedback, independent reviews, and those official records again.
Right.
So it establishes its perspective right away. It's looking at the potential downsides that emerge from real-world usage.
And that structure you mentioned, common issues versus safety risks, that's crucial.
Yeah, it suggests a difference in severity, right?
Yeah.
Common issues might hit your satisfaction, your convenience, whereas safety risks, well, the name says it all. They could affect the car's safe operation.
Okay, let's dive into that first bucket then. The common issues, according to this source. These are the things popping up often in user reports, maybe frustrating, maybe hinting at quality control, but not always immediate dangers.
So the analysis kicks this section off with what it calls compatibility issues. It frames this as kind of a side effect of the Model 3 being so software heavy, designed for all this tech integration.
Which allows for cool features, but maybe opens the door for glitches.
Exactly. Potential friction points when different systems try to talk to each other.
And the first specific example is super modern, isn't it? Smartphone incompatibility. The source says users report real trouble just unlocking and starting their car with their phone.
Yeah, and the reported cause sounds almost too simple. The Tesla app itself just isn't working right with their particular phone. Could be connection drops, delays, just unreliability in that communication link.
Okay, think about that for a second. You buy this cutting-edge car where your phone is the key. That's part of the appeal. But then, according to the source, sometimes you can't even get in or start it because an app is glitching. That's got to be incredibly frustrating. Standing there, maybe it's raining, phone in hand, car won't open.
It really highlights that reliance, doesn't it?
It does. It's like this aha moment where the futuristic tech is tripped up by a basic connectivity issue, a surprising point of failure.
Exactly. When it works, it's brilliant. But the source suggests, for some, it's been a source of real unreliability for a core function.
And it's not just phones. The source also flags home charger issues.
Right. It mentions observed incompatibility problems when using home charging stations from different brands, not just Tesla's own.
No, reliable home charging is, well, it's essential for EV owners, isn't it? That's the main way you fill up.
Absolutely crucial for daily use. So if this source is right, you might buy a standard home charger from a reputable brand, assuming it'll just work, plug and play,
Right.
only to potentially find it doesn't communicate properly with the Model 3.
So what happens then? Less convenient charging, maybe needing specific equipment?
The source doesn't spell out the only solution, but it points to that incompatibility with other brands. It could mean slower charging, needing to use public chargers more, or maybe feeling pushed towards Tesla's own gear. The surprising thing here is that standard equipment, things you'd expect to be interoperable, might cause problems, according to this analysis.
It hints at maybe some complexities in the wider EV charging world, how different systems interact. Adds a layer of potential hassle you might not expect.
And sticking with software, the source brings up bugs after software updates. This is about new software versions causing conflicts with the car's existing hardware.
Right, so updates meant to improve things might actually break stuff.
That's the reported effect, yeah. Disruptions in various functions. And this is where the whole software-defined car thing gets really interesting, according to this analysis.
Because updates are usually good, right? New features, fixes.
Usually. But the source highlights that for some users, these updates have apparently introduced new problems. Features stop working, things get glitchy.
Why would that happen, though?
Well, the source connects it back to that deep integration. In a traditional car, maybe the radio software is separate from the engine management. But here, where software controls so much acceleration, locks, charging, everything, a change in one place could, maybe, have unexpected ripple effects somewhere else.
Ah, okay. So it's not just theoretical. The source says it's a reported experience for some owners.
Exactly. It's different from older cars where problems were often physical wear and tear. Here, the source suggests issues can be introduced by the improvement process itself.
It makes you think about your phone or computer updates, right? Sometimes they're smooth, sometimes not so much.
Precisely. The source indicates some Model 3 users have experienced the not-so-much side of things.
It really shows the two sides of that coin, doesn't it? Constant updates are great potential, but also carry this risk of unexpected bugs, according to this source.
Okay, moving away from the digital realm now, the source looks at a very physical, very visible feature, the glass roof. It discusses issues under the heading faulty glass roof, calling it an important part of the Model 3's design.
Yeah, it's a big part of the car's aesthetic. Gives that open, airy feeling inside.
But the source flags reports of manufacturing-related defects tied to this roof.
Okay, like what specifically?
First up, sealing problems. The source says users have reported water actually leaking into the car during rain.
Wow. Rain inside the car. That's not good.
Definitely not. The implications are obvious. Potential damage to the interior, upholstery stains, maybe mold over time.
And electronics, if water's getting in near the roof liner.
That's a major concern too, yeah. Potential for future electrical gremlins. It really undermines the whole premium feel of having that panoramic roof if it leaks.
Yeah, it turns a cool feature into a real headache. What else?
Even more concerning, the source mentions reports of the glass cracking or breaking. It does say these are rare cases, but it reports instances where the glass roof panel has cracked or, incredibly, even detached from the vehicle.
Detached. Under what circumstances?
The source mentions these rare events happening reportedly at high speeds or sometimes just while parked in the sun.
Okay, rare is important context, but the fact it's reported at all for a structural part like the roof is significant.
Very. And remember, the source mentioned manufacturing defect.
Right. What could that imply here? Weak glass. Problems with how it's glued or bonded on. Stress from speed or heat.
It raises those kinds of questions, yeah. Questions about the roof's integrity under certain conditions based on these reports.
Anything else with the roof?
One more thing. Fogging in cold climates.
Like condensation building up on the inside of the glass.
Exactly. And crucially, the source explicitly links this to safety. It says the fogging can reduce visibility and affect driving safety.
Okay, so not just annoying, but potentially hazardous. How would that work? You're not looking through the roof to drive.
True, but imagine severe fogging up there. Could it be distracting? Could it obscure overhead traffic lights or signs? Maybe just reduce your overall sense of visibility within the cabin, especially when it's already cold and damp outside.
I see. So the source presents it as more than just a cosmetic thing.
Yeah, what stands out is that connection they draw from simple interior fogging directly to a safety concern. Shows how design choices can have unexpected impacts.
Interesting. Okay, what's next after the roof?
The source moves on to paint defects. It prefaces this by saying the assembly quality of the Tesla Model 3 has been criticized from time to time, and then zooms in on paint application issues.
All right, paint quality. What kind of problems are reported?
First, a thin or missing paint layer. The source says insufficient paint thickness has been observed in some areas on some cars.
So obviously that's an aesthetic issue, doesn't look great, but does it cause other problems?
Well, less paint means less protection against the elements, right? It's a fundamental quality control point the source is raising.
Okay. And does
Good
that
point.
lead to...
It potentially leads to the next point, rapid peeling, or rusting. The source mentions reports of early rusting, especially in vehicles used in winter conditions and on salted roads.
So if the paint layer is thin, it makes sense it might not hold up well to harsh conditions like road salt.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. Cars are generally expected to withstand normal environmental challenges. Early rust, particularly linked to thin paint in those conditions, is a concern raised here.
Definitely something listeners in colder climates would want to be aware of, based on this source.
And there's one more paint issue: post-production stains or bubbles. The source notes that problems like bubbles under the paint, cracks, or noticeable stains can apparently occur even on new vehicles.
On a brand new car, finding bubbles or stains in the paint.
That's what the source reports. It makes you wonder about the manufacturing consistency or the quality control checks happening before delivery, at least according to the perspective of this analysis.
Finding cosmetic flaws like that on day one would be pretty disappointing.
You'd think so.
Okay.
Okay, so we've covered compatibility, the glass roof, the paint. Now the source gets into the tech side again with sensor malfunctions.
Right, and sensors are critical for the Model 3's driver assistance features, yeah.
Absolutely crucial. The core issue flagged here is simply malfunctions in those sensors, the eyes and ears, for systems like autopilot and auto parking.
And how do these malfunctions show up?
Well, first, in autopilot and auto parking issues. The source says the reported cause is the sensors just not correctly perceiving what's around the car.
So the features just don't work.
They may not work, is how the source puts it, unreliably or maybe not at all sometimes. And think about it, many people buy Teslas for these features, for easing the commute, for help parking.
So if they fail unpredictably.
It's frustrating, definitely, and potentially jarring, right? If autopilot suddenly cuts out on the highway because a sensor lost track, you need to be instantly ready to take full control.
Yeah, you can't be complacent.
Or if autopark gives up halfway through squeezing into a tight spot, you're left finishing the job manually, maybe after you'd already mentally handed over control. It shifts the workload back unexpectedly.
Okay, that makes sense. What else with sensors?
A more concerning one? False collision warnings. And the source describes this as a kind of double-edged sword.
How so?
It says the vehicle may warn about non-existent obstacles. So, phantom alerts, beeping for no reason.
Okay.
Or, conversely, it may not detect the actual danger.
Whoa, okay. Both of those sound bad. Let's unpack the false warnings first. If your car cries wolf constantly.
You start ignoring it, right? It's human nature, alarm fatigue. Then, the one time the warning is real, you might dismiss it. Very dangerous.
And the other side, not detecting a real danger.
That's potentially even worse if you've come to rely on the system as a backup. The source paints this picture of a system that, for some users, is reportedly both oversensitive and potentially undersensitive.
That raises a huge question about trust, doesn't it? How much can you rely on these automated safety nets if their behavior is unpredictable?
Exactly. It highlights the immense challenge in perfecting these perception systems and the negative impact that both false alarms and misdetections can have.
And there's one more sensor issue, related to weather.
Yeah, bad weather failure. The source specifically mentions reports of sensors temporarily failing or having their performance degraded in rain, snow, or intense sunlight.
There's a certain irony there, isn't there?
A big irony. These systems are often sold as safety enhancers, maybe helping out when human visibility isn't great. But this source suggests they can become unreliable precisely when conditions are toughest: heavy rain, snow, or even bright glare.
So what does that mean for driving in bad weather with these systems on?
It means you absolutely cannot check out. You have to stay fully engaged, ready for the assistance to potentially drop out or glitch exactly when you might feel you need it most.
It really underlines that these are assistance systems, not full self-driving.
Definitely. The human driver is always the ultimate responsible party, and this source suggests the system's limitations, especially in bad weather, reinforce that. They aid, but you need to know their potential failure points.
Okay. That covers the common issues section quite thoroughly based on the source. Now, the analysis shifts gears, right, to the reported safety risks.
Yeah, this is where the tone gets more serious. The source explicitly calls these serious safety risks and mentions it based on user experiences plus some official recalls.
So, moving beyond just inconvenience now into potential hazards, where does it start?
It begins with battery issues. And to be fair, it starts by acknowledging that the source itself describes Tesla's lithium-ion batteries as long-lasting and powerful. That's a given.
Central to the car's appeal. But
the source adds some situations can pose a safety risk.
okay, situation number one.
Thermal runaway. The analysis reports cases where the battery system has overheated.
Overheating batteries. That sounds inherently bad. Are there specific conditions mentioned?
Yes, especially at high temperatures or during fast charging.
Can you explain thermal runaway simply? Why is overheating risky?
Sure, lithium-ion batteries pack a huge amount of energy. If they get too hot, maybe from damage, an internal fault, or just external heat plus the stress of fast charging, can trigger a dangerous chain reaction. Heat generates chemical reactions that create more heat, and it spirals out of control very quickly. This runaway heating can melt parts, release flammable gases, and potentially lead to fire. The source points to high ambient heat and fast charging as scenarios where overheating has reportedly occurred.
A critical concern for any powerful battery.
And that leads directly to the next point: fire risk. The source states, in rare cases, some vehicles have caught fire.
Okay, rare cases, again, important qualifier, but still, fire is a major event. What contexts are mentioned?
Due to battery damage after an accident or while parked.
After an accident makes sense. Impacts could damage the pack, but while parked. That's interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? It separates fires caused by immediate trauma from those that might happen later, maybe due to latent damage, some kind of battery management issue, or something else entirely while the car is just sitting there.
It suggests the risk isn't only tied to collisions, according to this analysis.
That seems to be the implication in the source, yeah.
And then there's a third battery issue, which sounds particularly alarming: unexpected power outages.
As in, the car just stops. The source describes sudden, unexpected voltage drops in the battery system.
And a consequence.
The reported consequence is that this can cause the vehicle to stop suddenly while driving.
Okay, that sounds incredibly dangerous. Losing all power in traffic on a highway.
It's a massive safety hazard, yeah, for the people in the car and everyone around them. The source draws a direct line from a battery voltage drop to the car just dying mid-drive.
Wow. That raises a really fundamental question about the reliability of the power delivery itself, doesn't it? Not just range, but consistent power to keep moving safely.
Exactly. It's perhaps one of the most critical potential risks highlighted in this entire analysis.
Okay, moving on from the battery, what's the next category of safety risks?
The source turns to suspension issues, problems related to the system that connects the wheels to the car, controlling handling and ride.
All right, what's the first point here?
Front control arm breakage. The source says some users have reported that front suspension components have actually broken.
Broken, like snapped.
That's the implication. The source does add a condition mentioned in these reports: when overloaded.
Okay, overloading stresses any car, but a control arm breaking, that's a major structural failure, isn't it?
It's absolutely critical. The control arm guides the wheel. If a front one breaks, you could lose steering control completely. It's a catastrophic failure possibility.
So even with the overloaded mention, the fact it's reported broken at all is significant.
Very significant, according to the source. It suggests potential vulnerability under certain loads.
What else under suspension?
Reports of unstable road holding. This is based on users observing the car to drift more than expected or finding the rear end is unstable.
And is there a context for this?
Yeah, especially on winding roads.
Okay, so unstable handling, drifting, loose rear end, particularly when cornering. That sounds like it directly impacts safety.
Definitely. If the car doesn't feel planted or predictable through turns, it erodes confidence and increases the risk of losing control, spinning, leaving the road. The source points to these specific behaviors, suggesting issues with how the suspension handles forces during dynamic driving.
So it's about the fundamental handling, safety, and predictability.
According to these reports, yes. And finally, under suspension, the source lists hardness or squeaking noises.
Noises, like squeaks and clunks. How is that a safety risk? Sounds more like comfort or annoyance.
That's what you'd normally think. But the source explicitly says these noises can negatively affect both comfort and safety.
Interesting. So why link noise to safety here? What's the thinking?
Perhaps the idea is that these noises aren't just sounds, but symptoms. Symptoms of, say, premature wear and bushings, joints needing lubrication, maybe even assembly issues. Things that, while only making noise now, could degrade the suspension's performance or even lead to failure down the line. The noise could be an early warning.
Ah, okay. So the noise itself isn't the danger, but what it might indicate about the suspension's health could be.
That seems to be the perspective presented in the analysis, yes. That these aren't just minor annoyances, but potential flags for underlying issues in a critical system.
All right. That covers suspension. What's the final category of safety risks in this source?
The last one is rear light issues. And the source kicks this off by stating the obvious but important fact. Lighting systems are vital to driving safety. Can't argue with that.
Communicating with other drivers, crucial. So what's the issue with the rear lights?
The analysis focuses on reported problems specifically with the taillight units. First, moisture infiltration.
Like water getting inside the light housing? Condensation?
Exactly. Condensation, water vapor building up inside the unit.
Okay, I've seen that on older cars sometimes. Why is it listed as a safety risk here?
Because according to the source, the reported consequence is that this moisture can shorten the life of the bulbs.
Yeah. So the condensation itself isn't the direct problem, but it leads to bulbs burning out faster.
That's the connection the source makes. Shorter bulb life means your brake lights, your turn signals, they're more likely to fail sooner than expected.
And if your brake light is out,
People behind don't know you're stopping. If your signal fails, they don't know you're turning or changing lanes. So a seemingly minor sealing issue, letting moisture in, can cascade into a safety problem by compromising those vital signals.
it's a good example of how a quality control issue can have direct safety implications down the road.
Precisely. The source also flags intermittent failure.
Meaning, the lights sometimes work, sometimes don't.
Exactly. The observation reported is that brake lights or signals have been observed not to work unpredictably.
Ooh, intermittent problems are the worst, aren't they?
They're particularly dangerous with something like lights. If a bulb is dead, you might notice it eventually. But if it works sometimes,
You think it's fine.
right, you check, it works. Then maybe it fails randomly while you're driving, right when someone needs to see it. It removes that predictability. Very risky.
Yeah, that unpredictability is concerning. Is there one more lighting point?
Yes, the last one, and the phrasing here is, as we noted before, a bit specific. It's titled Decreased Night Vision.
Okay, night vision usually relates to headlights letting the driver see.
Correct. The source mentions inadequate illumination from the headlights.
But then the consequence stated is unusual.
Yes, the source says specifically that this inadequate illumination increases the risk of being noticed by other drivers.
Wait, your headlights help you see. How does poor headlight illumination make it harder for others to notice you? That seems backwards. Are they maybe confusing it with taillights or DRLs?
It's hard to say definitively just from the text provided. It could be a mistranslation in the original source, or maybe it's trying to make a more complex point, like poor visibility for the driver leads them to behave less predictably, indirectly increasing risk. But we have to stick strictly to what the source says, and it explicitly links inadequate headlight illumination to an increased risk of being noticed by other drivers.
It's a fascinatingly worded point. It really makes you focus on the precise language used in these analyses.
It does. It highlights how crucial clarity is when talking about safety systems.
Yeah.
But that's the final lighting issue reported in this source.
Okay, so we've now worked through all the common issues and all the reported safety risks as laid out in the specific analysis. What does the source do next? Does it wrap things up?
It does. It moves into a concluding section aimed at potential buyers titled Conclusion. Things to consider before buying.
Giving some final perspective.
Exactly. And it tries to offer a balanced view, it seems. It starts by acknowledging the positives again. States the Model 3 may be a strong option in terms of performance, technological innovation, and the electric driving experience.
So it's not saying don't buy this car based on the issues.
No, it seems to be positioning itself as providing comprehensive info, not just negatives. But then comes the main takeaway.
The however.
However. It says the problems and safety risks detailed above require careful consideration from potential buyers. That's the core message derived from its findings.
Makes sense. Does it offer any practical advice?
Yes, it gets quite specific, especially for buying a used Model 3. It recommends potential buyers should review the service history thoroughly, check the battery health, which ties back to those battery risks we discussed,
Right.
and review any recall records, specifically looking for recalls relevant to the car's particular year of production.
Those are concrete steps. What does giving that specific advice suggest?
It suggests, I think, that these reported issues might not hit every single car uniformly. Maybe some production years were more prone to certain things. Maybe maintenance history matters a lot. It implies variability.
So doing your homework on a specific used car could potentially help you spot or avoid some of these reported problems.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. That due diligence is recommended by the source, given the range of issues it has discussed. It suggests a buyer should be proactive in investigating a particular car's background.
Okay. Now, one more section was mentioned in the structure. Tesla's response to these problems. Did the source material we have cover that?
Ah, good point. The heading exists in the described structure of the analysis. But looking closely at the actual text provided for this deep dive, that specific content detailing Tesla's responses is simply not there.
Right. So following our rules, stick only to the provided material we have to state that. While the source apparently intended to discuss Tesla's response, we don't have that information in the text we're analyzing today.
Correct. So we can't comment on it based purely on this source material. Our analysis has to stop where the provided text stops.
Understood. Well, we have certainly taken a deep dive today into this one source's account of the Tesla Model 3. We've covered a lot of ground. Compatibility issues with apps and chargers, those glass roof problems from leaks to fogging, paint defects, the sensor malfunctions impacting driver assist features.
hmm And then the more serious reported safety risks. The battery issues like thermal runaway and sudden power loss, the suspension concerns including breakages and instability, and finally those rear light problems with moisture and failures, all viewed through the lens of this specific analysis.
And just to reiterate one last time, this whole discussion was focused on understanding and relaying the points made within this particular source based on its compilation of user experiences and referenced records.
Absolutely. It's one piece of the puzzle, one perspective.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. Considering everything reported in this analysis, the potential frustrations, the quality concerns, the safety risks, and balancing that against the undeniable appeal of the Model 3's technology, performance, and the whole EV experience, how do you weigh those factors? What matters most to you when you're looking at a complex piece of tech like this? Is it the cutting-edge features, proven reliability, potential risks?
It really brings up that core question, doesn't it? About the balance between embracing innovation, maybe being an early adopter, versus waiting for technology to be fully proven and maybe having fewer reported issues.
A crucial question indeed, especially as automotive tech evolves so rapidly. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the reported issues of the Tesla Model 3 as presented by our source material. We hope walking through this analysis has been insightful.
Always interesting to get into the details of these sources.